2 seconds here. Okay. Welcome to the China EVs and More podcast. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. So feel free to post them into X, LinkedIn, or YouTube. In the next hour or so, my co-host Li Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. To our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. We ask that you smash those subscribe and like buttons so you don't miss anything from us in the future. Also, I'm pretty confident that Lei and I are two of the most knowledgeable people in the world doing this. So help us get the word out about this show to others. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at Sinowato Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinowatoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. A lack of electricity, Lei. Can you please introduce yourself?
Out of power, out of electricity, out of heat, freezing to death, doing this episode in the kitchen.
Oh man, we're like the mailman. We always deliver, baby. We always deliver.
This is 21st century infrastructure in the US, so we have to deal with it. And this is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 201. We officially have a trade war and a war of words between China and the US. And it was funny, right? On 5th, which is Wednesday of this week, just as President Trump was giving his speech in the Congress, Chinese Premier Li Qiang was giving his government work report right about the same time. And we heard about it was a spectacle to watch. I watched some of the President Trump's speech, but also a little bit of Premier's government work report. And we heard about the Chinese Foreign Ministry talking about they'll fight any type of war, whether it's a trade war or something else. But again, we've seen this, what would you call it? This flip-flop, whipsawing of the tariffs here in the US from Canada and Mexico. We have February sales. So lots of things going on.
Lei, I would just call this another Monday at the Trump administration. I mean, that's his MO. I don't.
Yeah.
I think for the next 4 years, it's going to be pretty choppy. Now, we could argue whether these policies are going to help the United States or not, but at the end of the day, the uncertainty is what really gets a lot of the businesses. To your point, prior to his speech, he had a conference call with Mary Barra, Jim Farley, and Elkann. I forget John Elkann, who are the CEOs of the D2 and Stellantis, who the tariffs, I feel, would disproportionately affect the automotive sector, specifically in the area that I live in the United States, in the Midwest, because we always have to remember Detroit's the only city where you drive south to get to Canada. And our Canadian neighbor is very close to me in Michigan. And then in Mexico, Volkswagen and General Motors have a lot of exposure just because they produce and manufacture quite a few vehicles there that they ship to the United States.
Yeah. And at this point, it's really not about the tariffs anymore. Jim Farley talking about this putting a huge hole. At this point, it's more about the inconsistency and the erratic decisions that are being made. Because for 1 month, you're preparing for tariffs, and then at the start of next month, you have one more month of relief, and then what happens in another month? Like in the auto industry, you just can't have that kind of inconsistent, which messes up your planning, right? And it takes, I don't know, 8 months, 12 months to move production.
Well, let me
And
add to
Trump
that,
is
Lei,
thinking
because
you can do it in a month, which is not. I mean,
well, uh, this is the extreme roller coaster that you're talking to,
yeah,
because the Trump administration version 1 put those he renegotiated the USMCA and created those policies that he's now kind of abandoning. Okay. And so I think that is the irony. It's not like all of these policies were Biden's policies or pre-Biden, the Obama policies. A lot of these policies, or some of these policies, I won't say a lot, the Trump administration put in place from a trade standpoint. So um, I think they were trying to hammer home without being too, um, you know, when you sit down with Trump, I'm assuming you need to stroke his ego. But you-
the yeah,
at a moment where legacy automakers are globally fairly weak, long term, we're not talking quarter to quarter, we're not talking annual year over year, because in the short term, GM share price has been great, but that's also because they've bought back about $25 billion worth of their own shares. So there's just not as many shares outstanding in the market. And then, with Ford, who I just saw their earnings or their numbers, sales for February of EVs was up 23%, but ICE vehicles was down 13% in the United States. So this is by far their most important market. And any hiccups to F-150 production, sales, manufacturing is going to really, really hurt them.
yeah, and we probably would expect a rise, a spurring of sales in March because of the anticipation that the tariffs would come back. The reciprocal by April 2nd, right? So, which is good and bad for the industry, but it's amazing how much sway the big three still has on the president. They can call him up and say, please help us, and we get this 1 month.
I don't know. I think you're giving that way too much credit, because
Yeah,
Elon is his right hand man. So if
yeah.
we're saying who has more sway, I would argue that it's Silicon Valley and specifically Elon, and you know, and this while SpaceX is raining debris down on some airports in Florida. So
And we can transition perhaps to Elon and Tesla with respect to China sales. And I think that the big number that jumped out in February was 30,000 units. But here's the
that's a
latest number.
nasty number, huh?
I don't know whether you saw this morning. 36KR just reported Tesla received 200,000 refundable orders for the new Model Y in China. 200,000. Uh, I mean, it's refundable, but still, that's why I say,
Well,
I have. This is a question I'm asking you. I'm giving this credit to you. Whether it's time to reach for that panic button or not.
so I don't think you and I thought that there wouldn't be a bump in sales because of Juniper, but Juniper plus FSD is creating this excitement for Tesla in China. My question is, with the G9 coming out, with the U7 coming out in the next few months, the i8 from Li Auto coming out very soon. How long does that honeymoon last? In our experience, we've seen that new products that seem very exciting prior to launch or during launch, they get maybe a month with the exception of the Xiaomi Su7, they might get a month of glory before a BYD, an Xpeng, a Neo, a Li Auto, a Mona, an Anvo, Zeekr. I could go on and on, and I could go on and
Yeah.
on. There's just way too many competitors for me to believe that this bump lasts through the end of summer, meaning that I think by June, July, we'll see how many of that 200 shake out, because Tesla sold a little over 300,000 units, I think, in China last year. So we're talking, and let's assume that production is around 100,000 units a month. It would take at least 2 months for them, because this is not, I'm only manufacturing Model Ys. There's also 3s on that line in Shanghai Giga, number one. Number two, they're still priming that pump from a component standpoint. So I don't believe they're ramping to 100% of the Juniper Model Y within 60 days. And so that 200,000, if it's true orders, could take 6-7 months to fulfill.
I think if we treat the Model Y, the new Model Y, as a single model in terms of competitiveness in China and the globe, it's still at the very top.
Yeah.
It's still at the very top. So we haven't seen really a similar one model, let's say one single Tesla Y Model Y killer emerge. We haven't seen that yet. But what you're saying is basically a host of these Model Y wannabes or killers that are pushing, that are adding on the pressure for Tesla. But it's right, and I tweet about this kind of the resiliency which you alluded to. I mean, how much can that continue? It's something we need to watch. So I think the 30,000 units. Again, I repeat what I said in the last episode and the episode before, is wait till end of March to make any kind of conclusion. Because on paper, 30,000 units. I mean, Xpeng did 30,000 units, and Tesla only did 30,000 units. I think that kind of spooked the market. But the larger picture is in the rest of the world, at least in Europe, Tesla is having some issues. There's no doubt about that.
And to give more context, like 30,000 units for Tesla in a month is almost half as much they would normally sell.
Yeah.
50 to 60 would be a normal.
And
normal
how
month for
much
them.
was that due to the changeover? Because people would have waited for the new Model Y, which began deliveries at the end of February in China. We don't know. And how much of those 30,000 were exported versus domestic? We have to wait till the CPCA number come out next week.
And we also have to remember that each of these Chinese EV companies in the domestic market, the Chinese domestic market, they're also looking at sales numbers every month to figure out how aggressive they need to be the following month for incentives, for promotions. And so they're not sitting there saying, oh, I'm helpless now because Tesla is gaining 200,000 orders. They're saying, how do I take some of those because they are refundable? How do I convince that Tesla order person to buy a G6, to buy ES6? And so we should see maybe over the next few months, what would normally be a pretty quiet few months, it might actually be pretty action-packed.
No, it's never quiet, right? And we saw the city of Hefei giving out a special subsidy for battery swappable vehicles, e.g., Neo. um, like on top of the 5-year zero interest financing that both of the Neo and Envo brands are offering. And the other panic button I kind of alluded to was, and I also tweeted about it, this Envo, because they um, this hard goal that they had communicated of 20,000 units in March. Uh, I don't know how they get there, or whether they still want to make that happen, or uh, it's starting to backfire a little bit
Yep.
to me.
And one of the things that I'd like to transition over to is the fact that now, and I had written the Empire with an S Strikes Back on my newsletter yesterday because we saw Toyota, and I don't even know, it's alphabet soup of a name, BZ43 something.
BZ3X, yeah, and they have actually a Chinese name for it. So,
and the ID3. They're both launching with a price point of around 15 or 16,000 US dollars, which so here's a couple things real quick. I think that's where they need to be, number one. Number two, I'm not as concerned about how many features now. What I'm concerned about is, can they execute on the features that they have in the vehicle? So meaning, does the software work? Are there latency issues? Because even if it's a simple car, which you would expect at $15,000, can it fulfill that promise of Toyota being a reliable car? Can it fulfill that promise of Volkswagen kind of being ubiquitous historically in the China market? Those are the things that I'm looking at now. And again, BYD is not going to sit around and let Toyota and Volkswagen take share without a huge fight.
That's the thing. And to be clear, the 15,000 we're talking about on the BZ3X, we should make clear that it doesn't have the higher levels of smart driving as their $20,000 versions with LiDAR, right? And also the pricing that they position that model in is actually cheaper. They're actually competing against the Yuan Plus. I tweeted about its Song Plus, but this car debuted at the Beijing Auto Show almost a year ago, the BZ3X. And it looked quite big. I think it's at least a RAV4 sized. RAV4 here in the US, it's actually gotten quite big. Not
really big.
It's really big. So I think it's much bigger than the Yuan Plus. So, and it's the pricing is actually slightly below, I think, some of the BYD similar position models. And plus the fact they talk about one interesting thing they put up at the press conference was, this is Toyota's first 新势力, which means new force. Now, 新势力 really means the Neos, the Xpongs, the Li Autos, these smart EV startups. And everything they talked about this the model, it feels like a model that was launched by a Chinese smart EV startup. One, the price, and second, RoboSense, Momenta, these bunch of Chinese suppliers that they showed that was about this model.
And you raise a terrific point, because the Xinshi Li, right? They're attaching themselves to the Chinese brands, so that Lei, when you're looking at an Envo, a Mona, a Neo, you're thinking about Toyota because they told you to think about Toyota. Like, indirectly, number one. And yes, the local content is something that stands out as well. And so I guess my next question to you is, how long do you think they can still charge for intelligent driving because they made this announcement earlier this week or unveil early this week. So they knew that God's Eye was going to come standard, and BYD started delivering vehicles with God's Eye now. So it's already in the market, number one. Number two, I guess we'll find out how much better these intelligent driving services are, or these featured intelligent driving features are, because our friends at Zeekr also launched an intelligent driving system called G something, G Force or something like that. So I'm excited, man. Maybe we'll get to drive them all, or at least get driven in them all when we're in China next month. And to do side by sides is going to be really important, or at least for me, to give me a better sense of how much progress everyone has made in the last 12 months.
But I mean, they claim to be the first Toyota's first SUV with these high levels of smart driving, and the first SUV in the industry priced in the $120,000 range with LiDAR. I mean, we talk so much about these Chinese brands, but you talk about Empire striking back. This is one example, kind of the legacy striking back. And Toyota, I think, relatively to other foreign brands, they are actually doing relatively better. They're still selling quite a significant amount of ICE vehicles, a lot of them hybrids in China. So, and this
They're
model, I
head
mean,
down. They're head down grinding.
and remember, Toyota signed this deal with BYD before the pandemic on this tech joint venture. So BYD actually also supplies some of the batteries to the BZ series. So they had this thinking, probably more than other foreign brands, of integrating into the kind of the Chinese EV ecosystem. And so, right, I mean, you shared the article where they said that the crashed, the order system crashed because there was, and then you look at this, and then you look at the ID every1, the 20,000 euro ID every1.
Tell us a little bit about that, Lei.
That's available in 2027, and then you're like, I can get a BZ3X for $20,000. Why wait?
Well, before we talk about that ID, everyone, can you tell everybody about this ID3 that's $16,000?
The ID3
The
in
VW?
China, or
Yeah, they just launched that ID3.
it's a new edition, I think,
Mm-hmm.
that was launched. It's called Congming, which is a smart edition. the and the ID4, remember, ID4 also had a price reduction, kind of a price reduction, 10 days ago, I think, at the end of February. And
Let me stop you there, Lei.
$20,000, $25,000 range.
Let me stop you there. You said this BZ3 is about the size of a RAV4, okay, or Chabuduo.
It's pretty big.
This is the benefit that Chinese consumers have resulting from the competition in the Chinese market. All these products, all these brands, we're not getting the benefit of that competition. RAV4 still costs $50,000 US.
No.
There's nothing in the US market that's worth a damn that's $15,000. Okay? Nothing. At a minimum, we have to pay $30,000, which means we pay twice as much for a product that's likely not as good and has technology that's years behind. So, and here's the thing. If the products weren't of a high quality level, Toyota and Volkswagen wouldn't have to go down on the price curve so low. because you and I would be smart consumers and we would
Well,
say, this Chinese vehicle is a piece of junk. So I'm going to still spend a little bit more and get a quality vehicle. But guess what? Everything is pretty high quality. And I would argue that the ID3 and this BZ3 probably have less features than a BYD or a Mona or an Onvo that are right around $20,000.
that means the power
Oh,
is
nice your power. Nice, dude.
no, but remember, I a few days I tweeted ago about Cadillacs in China are being sold at Buick prices, and Buicks in China are being sold at Chevrolet prices. This is price deterioration of the foreign brands going down as Chinese brands, they're charging a premium. Think about Ito. Think about some of the Zeekr models, uh, half a million RMB. And the foreign brands, they can no longer command that pricing power, first of all, and then how they price the vehicles. This is turned completely upside down. And that's why you
And
see, yeah,
to the creatives and to the marketing and to the agencies that the marketing agencies that are working with the foreign firms in Europe and the United States. The foreign firms are actually trying to position themselves as more Chinese now, to your point,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Tongming, Xinshi, like
Usually, yeah.
they're really, really leaning into, what? We're a foreign brand, but we have Chinese DNA. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Now, is that convincing? Because I'll tell you what, Toyota sells really well because their reputation for quality and reliability in the United States leans into their Japanese heritage.
And
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
And also Lexus has made that decision to set up a wholly owned venture in Shanghai to produce Lexuses in China. Uh,
It
so
is.
you know,
It's just. I always say this. I feel like I say this every 6 months. It's just nothing. It's just such an interesting time to be in the space and to kind of be able to follow it at a global level. Um, I know we don't get into the politics too much, but uh, they do affect what's going on, and that's why it's really so important to visit and check these things out. Because if you're skeptical of whether or not these Chinese vehicles can compete, then just go for a week. Rent a China, get an international driver's license and go for a week. Rent a car in China, rent a Neo, rent an Xpeng, and then you'll know. I think,
yeah,
um, and I'm going to pat ourselves on the back for 30 seconds, and that's why I think people trust us because as two Americans who have lived a good portion of our lives in China. Um, we straddle a little bit, and I think we're torn a little bit on certain things because we want the hometown people to win. Or at least me, being from Detroit, or just outside of Detroit. But I digress. I just think that it's really important for those that are commenting on how good or bad these companies are, these products are. I'd love to see you in April and May
yeah,
when I'm in Shanghai and Beijing, wherever I'm at.
yeah,
And
yeah,
honestly, unless you and I know the people that we don't get along very well with, but I'm happy to help in any way I can to help people better understand the China market, so they're not like spinning their wheels. So that's how I feel. So
yeah. I mean, even for us, I think I try to use the word enthusiast rather than expert because even as frequent as we get to go back, it's still a learning process for us because it changes every time we go back. Whether it's the capabilities, whether it's the how companies they reorient themselves. But as you can see, I think from the February sales numbers in the recent, whether it's the BZ3X, whether it's Anbo, the city of Hefei, launching this incentives and subsidies, I just feel like we're in another round of intense competition.
Well,
Uh,
that is
you know,
reflected in Onvo's struggles, sales struggles. You know, I think Neo is kind of consolidating some of Onvo's retail locations with Neo. And so a brand that you and I, or at least I thought was fairly promising, seems like it's off to a pretty slow start.
the I think the advice that I kind of want to give Neo is stop making these. Remember 3 years ago, I don't know, 4 years ago, uh, was it Chin Li Hong that he said the ET5 would catch up with the 3 Series? It never did. Uh, and now this 20,000 in March was specifically announced by Alan I at the Guangzhou Auto Show at their press conference, and he's like, if I don't do it, you guys supervise, and I may have to resign. That's what he said. And these kind of things, I just wish they, I mean, just get down to work rather than say these things that backfire.
I feel that Lei Jun bullies them into making bold statements a bit.
Yeah.
Because he is very humble, but he humble brags that Lei Jun, if you're wondering a good way to describe Lei Jun and his demeanor is that he humble brags. He says, I'm not that smart, but I go to MIT. It's those types of ironies that, we owe so much to Porsche, but we plan to beat them in a month.
Yeah, we talked about this last episode.
Those kind of things.
Silently
and that's the definition of humble brag.
Yeah.
And so it's like China EVs and More is a small podcast, but we're in 100 countries. We're downloaded in 97 countries, right? So that's a humble brag. But it's like a flex. Another way to say it for the younger folks, it's a flex.
So the SU7 Ultra, so less than 72 hours. So when we had the episode last week, they just announced that they had 10,000 orders in 2 hours. So now they have 10,000 locked in orders less than 72 hours. And probably by now, more than 20,000 firm orders. And they're actually saying that the SUV 7 Ultra is driving sales of the normal SU7, which still have dozens of weeks of you have to wait to get it, and the U7 is coming soon. So I don't blame him for humble bragging, right? It's just
and it should be noted that Lei Jun also said that they're going to go international in 2027.
Oh, I mean, they're an international brand already. I mean, look at their launch at the MWC, right? The in Barcelona.
No, I'm saying the passenger.
Yeah, the SU7, yeah, or their EVs. I mean, that's only a matter of time. We know that's only a matter of time, because they have these channels, they have these talent that are already there. So it's just a matter of adding one extra device to their ecosystem.
And that's where they have a BYD type of advantage, because to your point, they have the infrastructure. Now, it's for handsets, it's for air purifiers, it's for different things, but the brand is already recognized. It's recognized in India. It's recognized in
Excuse me.
Eastern Europe. A lot of these more emerging markets where people still want Apple features, but at a Xiaomi price. So uh, they're still firing on all cylinders. I'm very impressed with how long the SU7 has been in in a positive way in the consciousness of the Chinese consumer.
And
So
see how Lei Jun, he always brings um, these new topics into viral discussions. And the latest example is being the license plate. He submitted a motion about the green EV license plates about China, and that has become a huge topic of discussion. Uh, so uh, I thought that was one of the very interesting proposals or motions that came out of these Chinese auto executives. Uh, He Xiaopeng was an NPC member. Lei Jun was an NPC member. They both submitted a number of
can you tell people what
motions.
NPC is?
NPC is National People's Congress, which is the legislative body, and it's one of the so-called two sessions, the other being the CPPCC, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, which is the advisory body. And in early March, uh, these two sessions meet to kind of talk about the government work report, talk about the laws and the
Where they
policies governing trade.
establish where
Yeah,
they established a growth forecast for China.
GDP. Yeah, again 5%. And I think one number that has relevancy to the auto industry was 300 billion in the so-called super long-term bonds that's been earmarked for the trade-in incentive to spur consumption. And the number they give for the auto industry is that as of March 5th, they've received over 1 million applications for either trade-in or scrap um, incentive. So that's an additional 1 million vehicles that's not there had that policy not been there. So this is
But
how China is
it's
driving
largely
it.
symbolic,
Yeah.
these two sessions, but I think there is some influence that can be had by the folks that get invited. So Lei Jun, obviously, you had mentioned earlier, is a member, and so I think Wang Chuangfu has also been influential in um, kind of emphasizing what's important to BYD as well. So,
And
uh,
yeah, and the other, I think, the other important motions or proposals raised was one on autonomous driving and the other one on battery swapping. I think the chairman of GAC Group, I think he also submitted something about spurring this battery swapping.
I still think battery swapping is building momentum, but it's actually pretty slow. I think Onvo not making a huge impact in a short period of time makes that struggle even worse.
I think,
Um,
yeah, if you look at the BZ3X, it also impacts models or brands like Envo because Envo with the battery swapping, the BAS, is also in the 150,000 RMB range. Um, so it's multiple competition gunning for each other. It's not only the Chinese gunning for Tesla; it's the Japanese gunning for NIO. Right? This is all interrelated.
well, I
That's what makes
think
it tough.
what's important to understand is that the foreign legacy automakers, because let's say Chevy is almost non-existent, Ford is almost non-existent, and so the Toyotas and some of these, like the Volkswagen brand, they probably think that they're not going to win too many battles with BYD, so they need to go attach themselves and position themselves to everyone else. Okay. And BYD just has so many different products, brands, variations at all these different price points. So the totality of what BYD has on offer in China just makes it so compelling for a Chinese consumer to buy a BYD, as
And
opposed
then,
to the foreign legacies are still redefining themselves in the China market.
and then BYD, they can quickly establish this DJI
这是
relationship.
什么?
It's yeah, sorry,
It's a Xiaomi smart rice cooker?
something like that.
Oh my goodness, dude.
So no, I was saying that, and BYD can quickly come up with this new idea, working with DJI on this drone editions of the Fangcheng Bao, right?
It's kind of weird.
It's a bit cheesy, but still, right? It's a type of innovative
Which car had that
product
selfie
format.
cam? Remember the Chinese EV that had the selfie cam? Was that hi-fi?
No, I think XPeng, when they launched the G3, they had this thing that come out on top.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
that-
so
that
that was
could-
so
that
it was
could keep
Xpeng. It was Xpeng. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, think of it like Fangcheng Bao has a GoPro.
Yeah. Huh.
So
Basically.
but they've partnered with the right company, DJI. If anyone can pull it off, it would be DJI.
Yeah, and DJI is not, insignificant in the auto industry, because Volkswagen is using DJI. And speak of Volkswagen, eCarX just got into the Volkswagen Group and Skoda in Brazil and India. They're actually providing hardware for these entry-level models of Volkswagen globally.
This is so confusing for Volkswagen Group, because they wrote 2 huge checks. And so for everyone that's wondering, eCarX was Geely's car yacht. They're a publicly traded company now
They're
in
US
London.
listed. Yep.
Or London, I think, or
they're
US. I
US
think it's
listed.
London. And so if we're keeping score, Volkswagen Group now has hardware software coming from Rivian, hardware
XPeng.
software coming from XPeng, well, maybe just software from XPeng, and then this announcement now with eCarX. So I don't know how that's a winning strategy at all. Why wouldn't they? So let's say Rivian, that IP is a little more expensive than an XPeng. Why wouldn't they ride or die with XPeng in South America? So it's just baffling to me when things should get, because here's the simple equation. If I introduce a lot of different players, it gets more complicated and it slows me down at a time where I need to simplify so I can speed up.
Yeah. Well, the
I
English
think
jargon would be diversification.
I think, Lei, that German management, US management, Japanese management at these big conglomerates, they don't know how to simplify. They only add layers and process, which is opposite of what a startup does. Now, startups also sometimes reinvent the wheel because they don't know how. They don't have mature processes and policies, so there's a give and take. I get that, but
Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw that, but I posted a little excerpt from an article that one of the Volkswagen Group or Volkswagen brand chief said that Rivian is going to be responsible for all of our hardware software. And then do you call it X? I X'd a tweet.
It's called Carriot, right? Or...
Yeah, I said, so what is Carriot doing? That's what I wrote.
Oh, right.
And
right. Yeah. So
And
it's yeah,
I
it is
just
shocking.
don't know what is going on there. But if I'm part of the carryout team, I can't feel very good. So,
No, but
eh,
speaking of reinventing the wheel, FAW is reinventing the wheel through Leap Motor. Looks.
mhm.
The significance is that FAW being the number one centrally administered state-owned enterprise, uh,
So for
and
those
now they
wondering, FAW stands for First Auto Works, and FAW is in Dongbei, which is so in Chinese literally means east north as opposed to northeast. But they have joint venture currently with Volkswagen Group
and Toyota.
and Toyota, and they build so a lot of Volkswagens,
Yeah, and
and
their Chinese brand, independent brand, besides Hongqi, is actually pretty weak. So it's interesting that they have picked Lead Motor to develop uh, NEVs, and possibly there could be some capital collaboration as well. So that's interesting. Now you have Stellantis as a shareholder in
what a
Lead
tangled
Motor.
web we weave.
Yeah, and remember, this is not the FAW's first time working with a Chinese smart EV startup. Remember Byton?
Yep.
FAW was bought into Byton a few years ago. Remember that? And that didn't go anywhere. And now it's kind of like a second try.
And we should congratulate Daniel Kirchert. He launched a new
Venture.
venture. I forget what it's called. Daniel Kirchert, for everyone. First of all, he's a good friend of ours. He was an ex BMW sales executive for China, German, but is very uh, has a lot of Chinese innovation going around in his head. He was a co-founder at Byton, and recently saw him in Paris, I think. Uh, so he launched a commercial trucking venture with GAC,
Mm-hmm.
and he plans to sell them into the European market. I
Yeah.
forget what it was called. I'll have to look on LinkedIn and
Yeah, it's
find
an
it.
interesting name. I forget as well. So,
Congratulations
uh,
to Daniel.
yeah, yeah.
Hopefully, we'll get to see him sometime soon. But oh man, the Stellantis, FAW, Volkswagen uh, seems pretty complex,
Yeah.
and with Leap Motor now, so it's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot going on. But I talked about this earlier. Desperate times, you start creating these weird partnerships, and we're starting to see that. So,
Yeah, we're
I,
partnerships and then really going low with pricing. We talked about BZ3X and high with Chinese content. You know, um, the same for Nissan. Uh, and the same day that the BZ3X was launched, I think all the discussions submerged the Dongfeng Honda S7. It was launched on the same day, but it was based on that new Ye brand, which they no longer talk about because Ye doesn't resonate. So it's just called the Dongfeng Honda S7, and that's a kind of a CRV sized EV priced in the high 200,000 RMB range, uh, which I don't know. I think it's overpriced. Um,
like, can you hear me? Somebody just posted that
yeah,
they
I
couldn't
can
hear
hear you.
me. Oh, okay.
I can hear you.
Let me see here. That's pretty much
Yeah,
all I have. Let
that's
me.
pretty much all for this week. Um,
So, some housekeeping before we get to comments and questions. I'll be down in Austin
Good
starting
luck.
on
Have fun.
Monday. Looking forward to the barbecue. I'm doing a discussion with Ed Kim from Auto Pacific, Steve Levine. So it'll be good to see Steve, old friend of the show.
Also,
Uh,
Waymo is available on Uber, so I'm sure you're gonna try that out, right?
yes, and they beat Tesla for their robotaxi service. We have already downloaded the app, because I used it in San Francisco. We both used it in
Yep.
LA. Together, we used it.
But in
So
Austin, I understand that you have to use the Uber app, not the
Uber
Waymo app.
app, yep.
Yeah, right. So yeah.
So I will do that, and then we are co-sponsoring a happy hour on Tuesday afternoon at the Midwest House at South by Southwest. So hopefully we'll see some interesting folks, some people that I haven't met yet, but also some old friends. And then
So
anything
history,
else?
NEO, they had their global debut of the Eve concept at the
Hmm.
2017 South by Southwest. So,
South by
and I think
Southwest.
Rivian is sponsoring
Oh yeah, they are
this
our
event.
main
I think they
sponsor
have
for South by
something. Yeah, so
Southwest
it'd be
now.
cool to check that out.
So,
Yeah.
so here's some comments. One from Greg Reed. A point that I've been making for a while on social media. So many Americans incorrectly think the U.S. is the leader of global car production. That hasn't been the case, Greg, and you know this because you're bringing this up. That hasn't been the case for at least a decade, I would think. So
15 years.
no, if most of Greg again writes, if most EV buyers are Democrats and nearly all Democrats loathe Elon and Tesla now, and
This
the EV offerings from most other OEMs are not the best, do you expect US EV sales to be considerably lower than 2024 sales?
well, this is something that we didn't talk about. This Tesla's political stance affecting uh, Tesla sales more. I think more apparent now, at least in this side of the world, or probably in Europe. Less so in China, uh, but it doesn't look promising if we talk about Tesla growing
Oh,
sales.
Tesla will always be
Yeah,
apolitical in
yeah,
China. They will
yeah,
not,
yeah,
Elon will not say
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
So they will be completely
But
apolitical
at
in
this
China.
point, I think it's very difficult to see um, growth
I
globally
don't know
or
if
on
they
this side of the world.
shrink. I don't know if they shrink, but I don't see tremendous upside either unless there's this tremendous product at sub $20,000 that they plan to
Well, we still
launch
have the
into the
Model
US
Q,
market.
right? How that will do, we don't know. It's a wild card, I think.
So,
Um,
okay, here's another. If Trump wins the peace deal, I kind of got to read this and screen this before I read it out loud. So,
but I mean, Model Y in China, based on that report, seems pretty good. Uh,
yeah. Well, and Reuters had kind of posted about an article about how people are getting tickets and stuff like that. So maybe we can explain how that system works. So you get a driver's license, and then there's cameras. So if you uh,
oh, yeah,
disobey a
yeah,
law, the camera will take a picture and send a ticket to you.
yeah.
And if you get 12 points, then your
You have to
ticket,
go.
your
Yeah,
license can get revoked.
yeah.
But the camera doesn't know who's driving. So if you can technically move those points over to somebody
Yeah, like you
else.
can move them to me. Like we can. I mean,
Yeah.
it was you who had the penalty, but I could use my license to take off those points. That's
If I'm at 10 points or 11 points and the next uh, fine gets me past 12, I can say, Lay, take this ticket for me, and then go pay it and say it was your
yeah.
fault. So I can stay at 11 points. So there's the ticket is attached to the vehicle, not the person driving,
Yep.
which was funny to me because it was like, a lot of times my wife and I would drive on different days or whatever, and we would just because the tickets would just come and we would only look at it in certain periods of time, right? We weren't
Yep.
checking it every week,
hmm
but I wasn't sure sometimes who was driving the car when we got a ticket in Beijing, and so we would just make
Right,
sure that
right.
neither of us got to the 12. Let me see. If Trump wins the peace deal in Ukraine, he will regain some of his ability to withstand China in the auto industry because the Ukrainian metals deal is considered a treasure. Well, it might be a short-term win, but to really uh, say it's a win, there needs to be refining capacity, and that's still predominantly all in China for most of the minerals and rare earths. So it's minerals like lithium, like cobalt and nickel. So it's not just having the mines and having the mineral capacity, the actual minerals. It's also how to refine it so that it is automotive grade that can be put into a battery cell, battery module, battery pack. So
Wasn't there news that just came out that Sichuan province discovered a huge lithium ore or something? I remember seeing that this week. So
yeah, so that's really all I have. I Yeah,
yeah,
man.
okay.
I'm glad you got your power back so you can kind of warm up because it looks like you're a little cold with your hoodie all zipped up. But
Well, the kitchen is where I get my light in the morning. So
and we should let everyone know next month obviously is the Shanghai Auto Show, so you and I are going to be there. I've bought my ticket. We'll work out some details, but you and I are going to have some surprises while we're over there, and we'll make those announcements in the coming weeks. But
mhm.
cool, man. Are you have any volleyball or anything this weekend?
So volleyball. A couple of weeks we'll be down in Atlanta for a
Nice, dude.
tournament.
That's right.
So
Hey,
only one
so
per month.
everyone, I guess you and I don't need to be recording this while we're talking personal stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone, have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Bye bye. Talk next week.
All right, man. Cool, dude. I'm glad
So
you
that
were
was